All right, let's get going. Good. Welcome to our fourth Attribution Revolution event. I want to start off with an apology. I am on drugs longer than the list, longer than my arm, because I'm just sick as a dog. So I can't even make sense today. So if I stop making sense, what you need to do is get your iPhone or Android device out. Remember that hashtag, shoot a video of me, and post it to Twitter. It's going to be great. My name's James Green. I'm the CEO of Magnetic. We do search retargeting, which means that we remember the things that you're searching for and then serve ads to people based on those preferences. And we care a lot about attribution because, generally speaking, people who have a more sophisticated approach to attribution find that our service works better. So this evening is a completely self-serving event for Magnetic, so thank you so much for coming. We are going to start out the evening with a video, right?
Every single time we generate an impression online, we generate a piece of data. At the user level, every single click, ad engagement, visit to a site, user search, and even a purchase equates to more and more data. Data is stored in different systems and is being used by various media partners for multiple advertising strategies. We are swimming in massive amounts of data and have very few tools that create easy, actionable answers. With the right media measurement methodology in place, marketers can follow the consumer path from start to finish. We live in a world where it is almost impossible to live 60 seconds without seeing an ad. We have outdoor TV and the ever-expanding digital universe of online display, video, and mobile. The rise of digital advertising creates more questions and sometimes concerns about what, where, when, and how marketers should spend their media dollars. Without a solid attribution model in place, everything is called into question. Which creative was shown? Was it seen above the fold, below the fold? Who delivered the ads and in what time? Was it a publisher buy or purchased on an exchange? Did the campaign use search data, demographic, psychographic, and or site activity as part of the media buying process? And how do we measure the impact of advertising with so many factors in play?
So attribution, how did we get here? It's really more of an evolution rather than a revolution. Today, what we see at C3 Metrics is we see, on average, 32 multiple touch points of advertising. Who's getting credit for all the stuff that's in the upper funnel? The answer is nobody.
So attribution is the process of taking a conversion or a sale or something of economic value and attributing it back, distributing the credit for it to the marketing touch points that were measured prior to that conversion.
If you think about what a CMO's problem is, it's that they're trying to manage holistically a campaign, a set of objectives with their audience, with their potential customers, or with their actual customers, regardless of the silo. So, you know, whether it's search or display or video or mobile or social.
The opportunity for businesses is to move beyond the notion of having a perfect answer and instead be able to take data that allows them to make directionally and incrementally better decisions. As much as we talk about how last click is a problem today, it's enabled incredible optimization, right? Just think about the performance that you're able to get out of search advertising based on last click attribution. But last click, everyone agrees, is imperfect. So if we can just begin to think about how to move incrementally beyond that without having to focus on the perfect answer, we can really begin to see those gains.
The CMO needs to optimize where they're spending money, how they're spending money, how campaigns across different sectors interrelate to one another. And historically, that's just never been possible. We never had attribution. We never had cross-channel attribution because we didn't have the available data.
In a perfect world, every time you show an ad to an individual, you would know exactly how you influence the consumer. You would know which ads were working, how they were working, what the action was, and how you should adjust the media mix in real time across every medium and with which data.
All right. Let me introduce the panelists. Come on in. We got 4 panelists tonight. In no particular order, I'm going to start with Stefan at Google. We couldn't really have, oh, look at that, you've got a projection on your eyes. Can we shut the projector down? Yeah, there we go. That's much better. So couldn't be an online advertising event without someone from Google, really. So Stefan is here. Google, you know, their biggest products are all pioneered by last-click attribution. So, you know, and yet they're moving beyond it as well. So that's why he's here. Thank you, Stefan. Then, of course, we have Adobe, who have moved heavily into the space. Omniture and Kenshu and all of these other acquisitions they've done. They have a bunch of attribution models. And so both of these companies sell a variety of tools in digital advertising as well as attribution. And then we have 2 standalone companies that only focus on attribution. We have Paul and we have Jeff from Adometry and C3 Metrics. And we've chosen these 2 because they disagree with each other, which is always fun.
But we're friends.
It's true.
Friendly disagreement.
It's true. You'll see. I love the fact that you're sitting next to each other.
That's just for the camera.
What I'd like to do this evening is sort of start slow, start with a description of what attribution is, and then sort of slowly move forward. After each topic, I'm going to go out to the audience and encourage you to ask some questions. I prefer that format where you can ask questions as we're going along rather than waiting until the very end. So hopefully, and Jamie over there has a mic, she'll come get you. I'm going to stay as far away from all of you as possible so I don't give you the dreaded lurgy. All right, so Paul, why don't you start by defining what is attribution?
Sure, so attribution is not a new term. Attribution really is just how do you allocate credit. I think what's new is the methods that we're now using and some of the new methods that are out there around matching media efforts with the credit and figuring out how much credit should go to different media activities. So last event measurement is an attribution approach. We decide to give all the credit to the last event clicked on or seen. Now we're coming up with other rules-based attribution methodologies and more data-driven algorithmic methodologies. And that's really what I would say is new over the last few years.
Right. I'd like to add to that just a little bit.
Already?
Yeah, I know. Well, you know, how many of you here remember the days of using something called ACT? Anybody? Just a few. Some of us older folks in the audience here. ACT was one of these CRM programs that you bought this program, and it was. I remember it came with like 17 disks to install it, and it was like a contact management database that you installed, and this thing was incredible. And then this guy came along by the name of Mark Benioff, and he had buttons that looked something like this that said no software. Because the idea was that you could move this kind of to the cloud or to something where you could log in. And so attribution, although last click is a form of attribution, it's a form of attributing credit. Really what we're here to talk about is we're talking about a movement away from this towards attributing credit to the folks who actually drive awareness, build intent, and actually drive conversions for whatever it is that you're selling.
So, Stefan, he's wearing a button that says no last click. By the way, I'm sure he has more if any of you want one. I'm sure he'll pass them out for you. Absolutely. Talk to us about what some of the key performance indicators that we're moving to and where we are today with last click.
Sure. I know the last click buttons are actually for me.
They are.
They gave me a handful, but I kept them for later. So maybe at the after party you'll see me all buttoned up. So I think you know, what both Paul and Jeff said is very true. Attribution is really a shift in how we think about credit for the marketing activities that advertisers spend money on. And one of the things that I feel is, even though you cross out the last click, it's really in the first instance mostly about validating, right? So it's not so much about running away and doing something else that might be equally flawed than last click. It's really about getting much more bespoke in the approach that marketers take in measuring the impact of their marketing spend. And that brings us to the topic of KPIs. So obviously that very heavily relates to what aspects of your conversion data you take into account when you make your decisions. And most of the time, where last click really shines is a sort of ROI side, right? It's very easy to calculate one ROI figure based on one conversion number, which comes from last click. But we also know that that ROI might differ if you take into account other parts of your conversion funnel. So I think one of the strategies that we see advertisers take to approach that problem is really to investigate their data in the first place, right? So when we approached clients, it was about how long are your conversion paths? How many interactions do you see your users take before they convert? And all of a sudden, that sort of was leading them to understand that one single position in their conversion path and the measurements that spin off that one position, weren't sufficient because it's just too much complexity associated with their conversion paths. Equally, we found advertisers that understood all of this and they had really short conversion paths, right? So that users weren't even that engaged with the marketing materials. So they made a very quick decision and it was largely direct response. And that was also insightful because all of a sudden they had much more trust in what came a bit under scrutiny. So I think it's really about developing this understanding of your conversion paths and then derive those KPIs from there.
So Jeremy, I'm going to ask you a question about branding versus performance. Do you have an opinion on what sort of KPIs there should be for those two different tactics?
So I just think, so from what we've seen with our customers, the whole shift with attribution has gone from just initial indicators of what's the last thing people interact with before converting to really what's the perspective my customer has with our brand, with awareness of understanding the company and learning about them, all the way through what finally triggers them to make that conversion. I mean, we're in an age now where everyone has a mobile phone in their pocket that they can bring up website and start surfing the web. A lot of our retailers are facing problems with showrooming, where people go in and they'll go and bring up price lists and they'll start their investigation, their research, but that in itself doesn't usually mean the commitment to go and purchase. They may go and do additional marketing touches. They may go and later do additional searching online. But really the whole point is you need to understand, what are my what are my marketing activities, marketing efforts? What am I really trying to drive? And that's why you want to be able to take in more into account than just last click. You want to be able to understand, well, what drove my awareness? What got them to know me? And then after that, what do I do to help guide them along that path to be a successful customer and help propel our business? So yeah. Go ahead. No, that was it.
Sorry, I heard this gap. I'm jumping in. The one thing I think in talking about brand versus DR-oriented campaigns, and we hear that a lot, I think a lot of that's set up because of the challenges of the current measurement approach, which is the marketer knows that branding activities have value, but they can't prove it in a DR world where they're giving all the credit to the bottom of the funnel marketing activities. And so they create separate branding campaigns and separate metrics to kind of, softer metrics to try to justify that spend. I think what we're able to do is show definitively how those branding efforts are tangibly driving actual conversions. And so you don't have to go through all these kind of gyrations to kind of create, separate KPIs. You can measure the KPI that matters, which is, do they actually buy your product or not? But now you're looking back at the history of all the media that someone's seeing, and you can actually accurately calculate how much those branding efforts are driving people to ultimately convert. So I think that's, when I think about branding versus DR, I kind of look at it and say, that kind of goes away, and you're just going to start thinking about it more from the standpoint of, I have media that does a really effective job of introducing someone to my brand. I have media that's really effective at having someone that closes people, gets them at the bottom of the funnel, and then that promoter stage. And you'll start thinking about that way versus kind of branding versus DR.
So you are saying that the way to measure branding is you figure out your DR stuff, then you ramp up your branding campaign and see if that moves the needle with your DR.
Yeah, look, there is, and we're talking a little bit about, for some clients where conversions are happening offline, or more of a challenge is when the advertiser doesn't actually control the ultimate channel of purchase, right? So CPG companies, they don't have that data of who's actually buying their product at a user level. So that creates another challenge. But for an insurance company, auto insurance company, for example, they have branding campaigns, they have DR campaigns. At the end of the day, they're trying to get people to buy insurance. And so that branding campaign, you don't have to think of it as a branding campaign. You can say, what introducer efforts, what share of that's really driving people to convert? Because you ultimately want to get people to buy insurance. figure out how your campaign's doing that. Just allocate credit more accurately using attribution to figure that out.
Well, I'd probably also add that with regards to branding in that scenario, you can allocate, your success doesn't have to be conversion, doesn't have to be the actual sale. And a lot of times with regards to insurance companies or banks, the actual conversion happens offline. But measuring up to a lead or some other indicator, like sign up as a new user, sign up your email list, those are great indicators for branding.
Sure, those are KPIs that you can track and run attribution.
I'll just add to that. The big challenge for brands in terms of branding events has to do with when you're spending money in the programmatic world. So you have this branding event at the top of the funnel, and your conversion event is down at the bottom of the funnel. So the way we kind of look at it is that for brands and the branding events, the conversion funnel is actually upside down. So the real key of a real-time attribution platform is to be able to actually send the real-time signals necessary for programmatic buying, so that when you actually have an ad that within a time frame drives someone to your website or landing page, that's actually a conversion event at the top of the funnel and actually fires a pixel. So you have to kind of look at conversions. You have lower funnel conversions, so somebody buys something or does something online, and then you actually have upper funnel conversions at the top of the funnel. So brands, they need to look at digital in both the lower part of the funnel when there's actually buying activity and the upper part of the funnel when there's branding activity. So upper funnel conversion versus the lower funnel conversion.
So the biggest growth area in digital advertising today has been RTB, which you just mentioned, and the biggest amount of data used in RTB is first-party data, so site retargeting. That's the largest component of it. So how do you deal with the fact that there's so much site retargeting going on out there, and you've got metrics that move all of that, but it effectively is stealing credit from upper funnel activities? How do you attribute that in attribution? Any of you?
Well, so the challenge with all those activities are when you use last event attribution to judge performance, there's almost I look at it as if you look at how display activities on a post-click basis converts, you might get 1 out of 1,000 people to convert. And so your remarketing efforts might be 300 times more effective, which means you get 3 out of 1,000 people to convert. And to do that, you're going to blast those 1,000 people with maybe 200,000 ads to try to generate that kind of response rate. And so the negative impact that you could have on those other 997 people, where you don't see how they're converting, that's an aspect that last event attribution gives you really wrong data. And the media is so cheap, especially with the RTB platforms, that it kind of emphasizes this oversaturation, this overfrequency, to kind of try to squeeze out those last click conversions. That's one problem. The other problem is exactly what you get at, which is kind of this aspect of stealing share, which is this is a person that's obviously expressed some interest in the product. Now, granted, you got to get them back to convert, but how many of those folks would have converted anyway? And the retargeting companies are coming in and just throwing tons of media out there and getting that, it's essentially the equivalent of cookie stuffing that was going on before. And so it tends to overwash all the good marketing that's happened before that. And it reinforces this bottom of the funnel marketing activity where the marketers see remarketing efforts working better and better on a last event basis. It squeezes out the top of the funnel results that are inaccurately calculated. And then they put more and more money to work on those bottom of the funnel activities, and they wonder why their business isn't growing, because they're not doing anything to actually build awareness or generate demand for their product. They're just doing a more and more effective job of harvesting the demand that's already out there. And so those are the challenges that come out of it. You market ineffectively, you actually hurt yourself a little bit because you over market to some folks. I mean, who doesn't get skeeved out sometimes when you go to a website and within 5 minutes you start seeing ads from that company like nonstop?
Right.
And that's the point. Again, attribution can help solve that, because when you use an attribution solution, you're looking at holistically how someone converts, and you can see how if you drive too much media to someone, you can actually turn them off. And we've done analysis for clients like that, showed from a remarketing standpoint the right volume of media.
Yeah, just to add to that, so I think the point's really good. You're actually moving around your yield curve, and one of the things that I feel attribution is incredibly powerful is actually that it gives you other opportunities to spend money and try and influence your users, right? And that's actually the real key. So remarketing, as Paul mentioned, it's got all these sort of aspects to it, and yes, you could sort of squeeze out a few more last click conversions, and it might look nice for a while, but it's probably not the sort of more sustainable sustainable approach to actually get your brand out and make yourself known to your clients. But attribution, specifically, the reason why last click is great, the reason why I'm never going to wear this button, right? The reason why I'm never going to wear this button is because of last click, we now understand.
You have a job. Oh, sorry.
No, you have a job. So because of last click, we actually know that there's a huge part of the conversion funnel that we haven't looked at yet. That's where the great opportunity lies, right? And this is where most of the branding efforts will actually become visible and get a number attached with it that shows the impact, as Paul and Jeff mentioned, directly to the conversion. So in line with the existing ROI metrics, right? You don't need to change, you don't need to soften that. And I think that opportunity is something that is definitely more sustainable in some of the aspects that were outlined. For instance, with a more full-on approach in remarketing or ads that follow you around, right? Yeah, I think that's why I like last click.
I just want to, nobody here is mentioning the elephant in the room when it comes to retargeting is Facebook. How many of you surf the web every day, do your job, and actually have a tab open to Facebook? Raise your hand. Okay. Now how many of you know someone that has a tab open to Facebook? So the problem is that if those of you didn't notice, like 6 to 9 months ago, Facebook pivoted from a social network to like the largest ad network in the world. So what happens is someone goes through a conversion process, they see their tab, it says they have 0 notifications, and all of a sudden it says there's 2 notifications, that number 2 on the tab, and it's like crack. They have to go check it out. And so people have been trained over the last couple of years that they know when they click over there, nothing changes. It doesn't, I can still enter my credit card. I don't have to hit submit, but I can go over and see a picture of my friend's dog that's just been uploaded, and it'll still be there. But what ends up happening is that Facebook jumps in at the last second and robs credit away from everyone else. So listen, I'm an attribution company. He's an attribution company. You don't need to get attribution religion to fix the retargeting problem. What you need is you need some sort of conversion control, time control, so that, I hate to say that most of you are going to leave here tonight and half of you are going to stay on last click, and 3 years from now you're still going to be on last click. That's the reality.
Congratulations, Stefan.
Yeah, but be smart about it, and if you're downloading raw data and then assigning credit after the fact, because you don't have a real-time platform like what we or what Adometry offers, at least say the average person takes 3 minutes to convert. I'm going to throw anyone out who jumped in at the last second to try to get that last view or last click credit. Because what you're going to find is Facebook all of a sudden is going to be jumping in at the last second. And that's what they're going to be doing. And that's really what everybody's talking about here.
So let's check in with the audience. The topic I want to go to next is how to actually implement it. But before we go there, questions. So we've talked, yeah, great. So we got a mic here, so if you could say who you are, where you're from, and your question, that'd be awesome.
Hi, Sean Chaney from AccuQuote. I'm drinking the Kool-Aid in terms of attribution, especially as it relates to the attribution between display and search.
That's good-looking Kool-Aid, by the way.
And some of our other, that's good Kool-Aid. So especially between those two channels. But at our company, at AccuQuote, we're very DR-driven. In fact, most of our media is done performance-based. So if I were to play devil's advocate, if I'm channeling our CFO, I'm going to look at it and say, great, 90% of our media, everything outside of search, is purchased on a performance basis. So who gives a crap about attribution? If I'm paying for it on a performance basis, other than attributing some more things to search, I may still be spending $500,000 every couple weeks. I'm still spending that same amount of dollars. I'm still going to be spending the same amount of dollars whether I give a little bit more over here to Google, or I give or attribute a little bit more from a return standpoint over to Google versus one of my affiliates. What I'm looking for is, have you seen out there anybody who's using that data and using the attribution to pay either their affiliates or other people they're paying for media on a performance basis if I have $100 to spend, and I know that if I'm doing last click, I'm giving $100 to publisher A, but if I'm being a little bit smarter about it, I'm going to give $80 to publisher A, and I'm going to give $10 to 2 other folks. From your standpoint, have you seen anybody who's actually applying the data and successfully paying their publishers on a performance basis on a attribution basis?
So I know Paul wants to chime in, so I'll just quickly. Number one, Google's not going to accept partial payment for clicks. That's number one. So the overarching theme here is that no matter what, we still live in a last click world, but you do not need last click in order to make decisions. So we had a client that before we came on board, they did about a $300,000 media buy for a 1-month IO. It ended up resulting in 0 conversions, and they stopped it. And then about 8 weeks later, they saw conversion surge. They had no idea why. It was not seasonal. It wasn't the season for them. And then all of a sudden, we came on board. They decided to try that buy again. Somehow they got convinced to do it. And what they found is they found that, again, they canceled the IO, 0 conversions. 6 to 8 weeks later, tons of conversions came through, that same surge, but they could tell through attribution that they were all originated, all started from this one media partner. So they went back to that media partner and they said, hey, we would like to re-sign the IO, but here's the deal. We don't want you to try to jump into the last place. We're going to pay you a bounty. Anytime you originate someone and start the process, we'll pay you X. Don't change the way your platform works. Your platform is doing exactly what we needed to do. It's just that we couldn't measure it before. And that's the value of attribution, is be able to see who drives your conversion. Because the reality of your CMO and your CFO is this. Quarter by quarter, your needs are going to change. They will come to you in marketing and tell you, listen, we need to drive more new users today. Or we need to drive more these types of users who bring long-term value versus short-term value. Or we need to drive more leads. And sometimes you need different types of media partners depending upon what your quarterly goals are. So for you, that's what attribution is going to provide you.
The only thing I'd add to that is, so Jeff's exactly right. You're paying on a performance basis now using inaccurate metrics. So your publishers are going to give you exactly what you ask them for. And if you can actually give them better data on what's really driving performance and change what based on that, you'll drive better results. And you're hamstringing your publishers to a certain extent, because the media buyers that are bottom of the funnel activity, they're going to do just fine on a last event basis. But the folks that are driving more top of funnel awareness are hamstrung on what they can sell you because of the way that they're not going to give you media that doesn't perform based on the metrics you're providing. If you could actually figure out the real value they're bringing to the equation and pay them for that, you'll generate more business. So performance marketing can work just fine in an attributable world using fractional attribution. You just pay differently. You just use different metrics for that performance payment.
And have any of your clients successfully moved to that model?
Yeah, they are. They're starting to do that. Absolutely. It's
hard,
though.
Any published case studies?
No published case studies, but definitely can talk to you about it.
So
I'll tell you real quick. I'll just add.
I think Stefan should get a chance.
Oh, go ahead, Stefan.
You've
Sorry,
been
go
hogging
ahead.
the mic.
It's
there.
gravitating
Sorry
to
that you're
the
not
left here.
entertaining.
Tell me to back down.
Yeah,
go
back
ahead.
down. Big
Thanks, I will.
Help out Google a little bit.
Yeah, that's right. You need the help.
So the case study that I want to mention is that we basically saw a travel company, a digital online travel provider called lastminute.com, do a geo-experiment with their spend. And specifically what they looked for finding out how off last click was for them. So how many conversions came through in last click, and basically how much that would differ from true incremental conversions that they saw based on paid search. So we're evaluating paid search. And before any one of those three chimes in, yes, it's telling that paid search works well. Anyway, so what it basically was doing, it took on the whole conversion path. So what it looked at, because of the nature of the experiment, you're not limited to just looking at the last interaction. You're basically throwing all interactions in one bucket, and just geographically where those conversions happen and where you target your marketing spend. That's how you can compare baseline versus the treatment group, which is the offline spend, the generic spend, right? That's what they experimented with. And they found out that there is a sort of 43% difference between, positive difference, between what they measure with last click and what the search would actually drive. And that literally made them change the budget that they had in mind for their paid search advertisement, right? So that's the full circle. But geo-experimentation is something that's fairly heavyweight. So it's obviously the best data that you can get because it's causal data, it's true incrementality with a confidence interval and Bayesian statistics, but it sort of takes a while. It takes like 8 weeks to run an experiment. Yeah, but that would be a good example.
Can I just add two other points? Number one, Sean.
Jeremy, anytime you want to chime in.
You're never going to get Value Click CJ to change their business model. They're making way too much freaking money. That's number one. Number two, if you're going to pay someone on starting and originating a purchase funnel, and you're only going to fire the pixel at the bottom of the funnel, it's not going to work. Programmatic buying and RTB works on firing pixels. So you need to have a platform that can fire pixels at all different parts of the funnel. Because if you're going to reward them on that, you need to fire the pixel to say, hey, you did a good job. That's it.
Other questions on this subject before we go on to implementation? Yeah.
Hi, Ellen Pop from Starcom. I actually just wanted to elaborate a little bit on that question in that some of your answers, I think, went down divergent paths in terms of being able to activate on the models. Namely, in one scenario, it's the client and the agency working together to tell them, oh, well, we're seeing really strong conversion from you being first in the funnel. And then we also hear, well, if we give more data to the vendors and our publishers, they're going to be able to better optimize against that and we'll be able to see higher ROI. In terms of working with publishers with attribution models, how much information, how much data do you actually pass along for further optimization versus how much should you be kind of holding back and kind of giving piecemeal to test out and understand how to better work with the models?
That's a great question.
It is great.
How much data should you share with the publishers? I'm going to, because you haven't had a chance to chime in yet.
So I can try. So it probably depends first on your contract in regards to what you're expecting out of them. We have a similar with financial.
Let's forget contracts for a second.
Yeah.
In an ideal world, how much should you share with the publishers?
Well, in an ideal world, you want to let them know what they're doing. As was mentioned, you want to put the pixel in every place that you would see as success. In the stance of you want to be able to communicate, this is where you're doing well for us. So we have a client that has a similar situation where they had to trust the ad network. They had to trust them to say, hey, we're giving you quality people, but they had no idea. So they went on an effort to actually qualify through attribution and going beyond just last click to find out, are these people that are coming, yes, they're coming to my site, I'm getting them there, they do something, but do they make it to that final conversion? In this case, Financials 2 had offline conversions they had to factor in. Because the lead they only got up to a lead. They didn't actually get to a conversion. So theirs was even more complicated from the standpoint they didn't have all the information in a digital place. But overall, you want to be able to provide as much as you're comfortable with regards to your expectations for that network, but you want to be able to arm yourself with enough information so you can go back to them and kind of have an even playing field in regards to expectations and everything.
So you're erring on the side of giving publishers more information?
Assuming they're on your side and they're working towards your success metrics, yes. So I think there's a subtlety, though. So and I used to be a marketer before running Adometry, and so I think there's a very bright line that needs to be between your analytics platform and your transaction platforms. So would I rely, otherwise it's like asking a barber if you need a haircut, right? So would I let a DSP run my attribution modeling and therefore give that DSP platform access to all of my media, whether I'm buying it through the DSP platform or not? No. But should I send back to the DSP exactly how well their media that they're selling to me is performing so that they can do a better job of optimization? Yes. It's almost like there's the curtain, right? We're behind the curtain and we see everything. What we send back to them is, based on how we see everything, we can tell the DSP exactly how well their inventory is performing so that they can use that data to do a better job of optimizing. It's like instead of just firing a pixel, and we do this with a number of RTV platforms, we'll tell them every day how much fractional credit did they generate on the media they bought. And it's almost like an Intel Inside strategy. So they can use our accurate fractional attribution insight within their optimization platform and their bidding algorithms so they can bid more effectively using last event attribution. That's when it's a win-win situation. And that's how we attack the problem.
So I'm going to ask you questions that you can because you're going to chime in anyway. So do you then share more publisher data with that DSP? Maybe it's anonymized, but do you tell them, you know, you're here on the plan, you're here on the plan, the other one, someone else is doing this? You don't.
No, we don't do that. I mean, at the end of the day, it's up to the client. So if we're contracted with the advertiser, the agency to do this, we always encourage them. We say, hey, the publishers, the networks, the DSPs, these are your partners. They need to make money as well. And the key with attribution is this. Before attribution, before no last click, we were all playing the same freaking game. The rules were all the same. And now all of a sudden what's happened is the rules have changed. And it's changed for every single client. So for one client, you get this amount of credit if you're in this position. For another client, you get this amount of credit. So I need to be able to give your partners how they're doing, just like what Paul said, and how they're coming along. And I need to be able to give them that in real time. So that's where the pixel fire comes in. But in addition to that, you have the account execs who are trying to manage the account. So with our platform, we actually give them a login. But now we're going one step further because we understand that publishers and networks, they may be buying media for a client out of 18 different sources. So if they tag those sources uniquely, we'll actually provide them a way where they can actually input into C3 how much their cost was. And we promise with them we won't share it with the client. And some are saying, there's no freaking way I'm going to tell you my cost. But if they tell us their costs, we can spit back to them what is the most effective media that they can drive. Where can they spend the least amount of money to drive the most number of conversions for the client to make the advertiser happy and drive the most amount of profit for them? So that's what attribution can provide across the entire framework. Not only provide the numbers for the advertiser and for the agency, but also for the network as well.
Did that answer your question? Or do you want to go on? It did?
I guess instinctively, I obviously believe in attribution going beyond last view, last click. At the same time, what you're talking about relies on a certain amount of interdependencies among your publishing partners.
Yep.
So how do you control for that in the wild?
Well, you know, how to get everybody to play nice together. So the key is that at the end of the day, first off, let's assume that you can't get the client, because in order to do anything else besides last click, last view, you got to get the client to agree to that. And sometimes those discussions have to make their way all the way up to the C-level. It's like, hey, we've been selling steak since before you were born, my dear, and before digital was around, and this is the way we've always measured things. So you're telling me we need to look at the full funnel? Are you crazy? No. We look at the last action. That's the way we are, and we're never changing. That's how a lot of advertisers are. So for them, what can you do for them? Well, the first thing you can do is...
Give them a button.
Give them a button, damn right. You can try that, but you're not going to convert them over to last click religion. So what you need to do is try to clean up. Advertising data is actually, it's not big data, it's dirty data, and you need to clean it up. So the first thing you need to do is to clean out and throw away all of the ad impressions that we're not seeing. That's the first thing you can do. So if you just threw out all the ads that weren't seen and made last click, last view decisions just based on that, you would be doing a great service for your clients. ROI would go up. But then if you would do other things like throw out like the retargeters who jump in at the last second that we talked about, and then, throw out
again.
Yeah, brand search that jumps in at the last click, which for big brands is about 90% of the last clicks.
He's talking about Facebook.
No, talking about Google.
Said it before.
But that allows you to spend more money on the non-branded searches. By the way, it's more expensive.
All right.
Then you're good.
Let's move on to another subject. So let's talk about implementation. So I hate to go to you guys because you've been hogging the platform, but I'm going to go to you again because you disagree, at least mildly, about how to implement. So I want to start with you because you were just talking. Keep it short.
I will.
How do you go about implementing it? Talk a little bit about the rules.
So it's just tags that go up. But in terms of implementing, you don't want to jump into this and go all the way to full funnel for any client. To us, that's a huge mistake because you're talking about making massive changes very, very quickly. It's kind of like being at the top of the stadium steps in a football stadium and saying, just jump all the way down. Trust me, you're not going to break a leg or tear a calf if you're over 50. It's definitely going to happen, I guarantee it. So what we recommend is you do things like throw out the data that's not viewed, throw out the ads that aren't viewed, and then do attribution, even using last click, last view based on that. Then you add in rules on top of that, and then you add in more rules and more rules. Our approach is to do a rules-based approach using the data that the marketers know, the folks that have been running the brand for the longest time. And remember, an algorithm is just a set of rules that you plug into a computer that you run at scale, right?
All right, so that's one point of view, which is you decide what the rules are. You've got another point.
Yeah, so it starts in the same way, which is first you have to get all the data. You have to get all the user level data. I agree in one aspect where we do find with our clients you have to walk before you can run. But for us, walking before you run means what of the insights do you implement? Pick the low-hanging fruit, the things that are very obvious to do. But once you have all the data, our approach is to use a data-driven approach where we let the data tell us how much credit to apply versus trying to figure out ahead of time what rules to use. I kind of consider it, you're going to get exactly the results you think.
So your system's actually going to spit out a recommendation?
We're going to tell you more accurately, almost like multivariate segmentation analysis. Similar concept. It's almost like a series of massive number of lift analyses we do in the data to see how media element performs when it's in a converting path versus how that conversion path converts without that media element. And we do that across every permutation. That allows us to know exactly how much each media element is driving. From that, we then figure out what to implement. And there is an easing process with clients. They don't just jump right into the deep end. They kind of wade in to get results. But we think you have to let the data tell you what's really happening. Otherwise, you're beholden to whatever the rules are. If you want to make display look better, you just decide to give more credit to display. And guess what? Display will look better. Whether it's actually driving results or not, you don't know. So we think a data-driven approach is really required.
I'm going to go to you next, but I just want to point out here that that's a really, really different approach. And so as you're working with clients, or you're working with your internal organization, an organization that says, we know best is going to do better with a rules-based approach. And an organization that says, show me the data, and that's all I care about, is going to do better with an algorithmic-based approach, because half the challenge is cultural inside the organization. So,
I have a question.
Yeah.
So how does your system integrate with like Tagman, and how do companies like Magnetic use your data real time to determine where to run ads?
If you could just tell them who you are and where you're from.
I work for Peapod. My name is David.
Hi, David from Peapod. And I think how we integrate is no different. Whether you use a rules-based algorithmic system or a rules-based or algorithmic system, you still have to get the data. If you're using a pixel tag approach to collect data, and I'm sure C3 can do this, we can integrate our page tags with any tag management solution so that we get our tags on the pages very efficiently. And we can put our ad tag through the ad server to collect the data that way. So collecting the data is kind of one aspect of the challenge. And then once you have the data, it's how you process it that's different between us.
That was my question.
Okay. Okay. Sure.
A couple of questions in the back here. Yeah, in the blue shirt.
Brian Simpkins from Starcom. So I have a question. If I move to an integrated marketing stack, is this optimization going to happen programmatically across channels? Or am I going to need a third-party technology to inform those systems with a flat file?
When you say channels, you're talking about
search,
offline
display,
search. All digital, though?
Yeah, or we can talk within publishers, we can talk at whatever extent we want to. So is the promise of a programmatic stack going to optimize across those variables?
Right, so let's limit it to digital. So, Stefan, we haven't heard.
Sure. So I think the problem of sort of actionability is sort of in that area, really. And integration, obviously. So what you want to have is you want to have your attribution model that looks at the performance of your channels and then spins off differences in marketing strategy changes, really. So stuff that you think you should do better on these channels, right? And you flush those changes through to the channel automatically, right? Is that correct? Did I understand it correctly?
Right.
So from
integration versus a third-party technology.
Perfect. So from a product point of view, that's obviously that's a great goal to achieve. So from a Google Analytics or from a attribution modeling in GA point of view, we obviously are very close to ad serving channels like AdWords and GDN. So one of the opportunities that I see as a PM, for instance, in that area is to say exactly what you said. And if I understand my attribution modeling, if I understand the output of that attribution modeling, if I can translate that output into marketing strategy changes that make sense to me directionally to improve my ROI, I want those marketing strategy changes getting implemented in my channels as quick as I can, ideally at the click of a button, or as probably Adobe can tell you, even without the click of a button. But one of the things that we see that comes before that, right, is that you actually need to there's two things that are really, really relevant in that game, even though you have everything hooked up. The first one is, and it was said a number of times, is to trust the data that you harvest to generate those marketing changes. That's key. So if those marketing changes go in a direction, where you don't want them to go, then that's a non-trivial problem, because you have marketing changes that say, hey, this campaign is great for branding, this campaign is great for direct response. How do you make sense out of that, right? That's usually something where you want some human being with the right knowledge and expertise to look at that outcome before you actually have marketing strategy changes that directly flush into your system, because they can be harmful, right? And the second thing is, once you trust that, is how to validate the impact of that, right? And that's where I mentioned the lastminute.com example before, which is actually published, and I encourage everyone to look it up. So it was done without Google's involvement, just for my colleagues here. And I really want to say that experimentation, or the way to validate incrementality on those marketing changes, is a piece that is required to be in there, integrated, and almost automated before you can actually flip the switch and let it run by itself. I think that component is vital, right? So even if you have everything integrated, to have that level of trust in the data, in the marketing changes, and be able to validate that, those are the components that I see as an additional layer before we can get there.
Yep. Did that answer your question? You're going to follow up? Yeah, that's good. Okay. Do you?
Patrick McCormick at Starcom. How do you see the changes with the cookie blocking and some of the browsers changing their defaults affecting attribution?
We're all screwed.
Okay, cool.
No. I'm just kidding. We saw this, we actually saw an increase in cookie deletion about 9 months ago. And it was right around the time that IE10 came out and said they were going to start blocking things. And then we started looking at the data. I mean, we're in an interesting position from a PII aspect because we're not involved in targeting. We've got all this big data. And I see this funnel that's right here. I mean, as soon as we see a user, we create a funnel for them. And then somebody converts, and I see their ID, and I say, I have this data here, and I have this hole, and I have this data here. And then there's something that matches perfectly, but it's a different user ID. So using kind of matchback technology, we've been able to kind of add that in using, I hate to say the word fuzzy logic, but it's the same type of technology that's being used to match across multiple devices, which we're rolling out as well. So being able to take that and roll it out towards a targeting side, that's totally different, because then you're dealing with a lot of privacy issues. But once we have all the data, there's a lot that we can do to kind of handle for that.
Does that assume we still have a sizable collection of good data? So if it goes way the other direction, does that impact what we can do? So if you have some, so Mozilla stops tracking third party, you still have everybody else. But if everyone goes that direction, does that impact what we can do with the attribution?
It's going to make it a little more difficult, but I still think based upon the methodology that we're utilizing, it's not going to be a problem at all. And we're anticipating that now that Mozilla has gone there, that Safari's already been there, Safari Mobile's been there forever, and IE10 is there. They say they don't think Chrome's going to be going there, but with the amount of authentication that they have for users, I don't think it'll be very long until they go there, because we've seen a lot of decisions that Google has made based on some FTC potential privacy involvement. So it wouldn't surprise me. That's going to be the direction that it's going to be heading.
So just to clarify, IE10's not doing what Mozilla's doing. IE10 puts in the header that this person shouldn't be tracked. And
do not track, sorry,
that. Everyone's ignoring that. They're still collecting the data. Google, Facebook, everyone is.
That is an important thing.
Yeah.
That
so Mozilla is what they're doing is different, where they're actually going to make it an opt-in. You have to opt in to allow tracking to be set up, and that
just like Safari.
Yeah, just like Safari. Safari has like 5% market share. Mozilla has 26% market share, so it has a bigger impact.
Safari mobile, iPad. How many of you use an iPad or an iPhone? Raise your hand. So all those folks can't be tracked, can't be retargeted, that type of thing.
So this reminds me of CAN-SPAM 15 years ago, just with the in the email space, just all the angst around we have to have this kind of Uber opt-out policy, or everyone needs to opt in to get email, and the industry was able to coalesce, and the government coalesced it around a pretty rigorous opt-out process, and it went away as an issue, and the privacy zealots out there that want to block cookies and block email are able to have their say, but everyone else is able to kind of get the content that they want to get. The reality is if Mozilla goes forward with what they say and everyone else does, everyone's just going to go to tracking vehicles like using e-tags or using other things that are way more privacy, have way more privacy concerns than a cookie does. And so I think it's really evident. I mean, I should be preaching to the choir. We all live in a cookie-based world. Yep. Folks should realize that it's a benefit to have something where the user, irrespective of having to figure out what sites are collecting data on them, that they could go into their browser and proactively set a fact that they don't want to be tracked. That's a real positive for privacy advocates. Forcing everyone to have that so that our entire industry has no way to monetize good content is going to create incentives to just track a different way. All of those ways are going to be more onerous than cookies are. So we'll find a way to track users. We will. Yeah. It'll keep happening. It just won't be good for consumers.
Yeah.
I have a question that's maybe for somebody else.
Okay. It's a good point.
Is there any way to incorporate offline stuff with online stuff? So we run a lot of TV commercials. Any thoughts on that? How you would integrate that into the conversion funnel?
Jeremy, let's start with you.
Sure. So, I mean, the obvious problem there is that it's not tracked down to a user level. You have some online media with regards to replay of TV ads and things online, but again, the what you're talking about is offline media, not tracked down to user level. So what we've seen with customers is they bring it in aggregate, bring it into the solution sets, and then they perform correlation, so more quantitative analysis to understand what impact it has in whole against their business. The issue with that is you can't drill down in different segments of the data to figure out where and exactly how it's involved or impacting, but you can see positive correlation or negative. Other things we've seen with customers is that something like TV ads, they actually tend to be lifters for other types of marketing channels like social. So you can end up seeing positive impact there and lift there. So another one is if you have a tag on the, you say go to a certain website. You have a tag that marks that as a certain campaign. So you can do that more by inference rather than direct correlation is what we typically recommend as well.
Do people upload like logs to show, location where the ads ran to see if there's a link?
Yeah, I mean, so these guys have products that do that more than those guys. So you're.
Yeah, typically they'll upload logs, date and time, DMA, and actual cost of the spot.
So we have that through Genesis and with regards to loading that type of aggregated data.
Moving more along that offline question, what about the effects of PR? And we talked a little bit about mobile and social, and how do you factor all of that stuff in as well, or is it just the same answer to that question?
So it starts with just you have certain media channels where you have user level data, and then you have other media channels where you have aggregate level data. That's the distinction. We are finding opportunities to take traditional kind of offline media channels and convert them into user level like data. Like direct mail is a great example. Direct mail is a offline media channel, but we can take a list of direct mail pieces that are mailed out and match it to our cookies and be able to look at direct mail like any digital channel and run attribution on a very granular user level basis. But when you get into TV, earned and owned media, then you start using some of these more, it's still granular data, but it's not at a user level.
What kind of match level do you see on direct mail, for instance?
So that's a great question. It depends on the size of the advertiser. We actually tend to get a pretty, and the partners you're using to do that match rate. You honestly don't need a super high match rate to have enough statistical data. Our modelers tell us we need like high single digits. Every test and everything we've done for clients has been as low as 20% to as high as 50% match rate. We can do that because if we have an advertiser we're throwing out a lot of cookies. If we have an advertiser that's buying 2 billion impressions a month, we're throwing out a cookie on all 2 billion of those impressions. So our ability to have a very high match rate is very high.
Can you match on
we match on cookie. We do a cookie sync. We're not. We work with partners that take an address and they have kind of a DMZ zone where they have partnerships with sites that collect address data as part of a purchase process or a registration process, and they drop an anonymous cookie that ties data to it. It can be complicated. I don't want to go down a rat hole here. Just recognize that we use partners that help us match offline address data to our cookie. Like who? No, the partners we work with, people like DataLogix, LiveRamp. These are companies that do this. And any data company like Nielsen or Axiom or Epsilon that has lots of third-party data at a household basis that's now offering that in a cookie pool uses some partner to bring that data across to a cookie pool. Those same partners. They match on address, but they do it in a PII compliant way, in an anonymous way. I can explain it further if you're interested. I don't know if anyone.
Don't get paranoid.
Yeah, right.
So we're down to about 10 minutes. Just so you guys who have questions, let's take one over there.
I just wanted to flip the question about offline conversions, offline data to the conversion element. If you're focused mostly on offline conversions, how are you able to bring that into your attribution modeling?
So you can do the same thing. If I have address data of those conversions, so we'll have big financial services clients that have huge CRM data sets. We can take that list of customers and match it against the cookie to be able to track it that way. And then there's also just less elegant but even simpler solutions, which sometimes customers will still collect email address for offline conversions. Think of a travel company, United Airlines, where I know you're from, because we just talked a little while ago. Even if the conversion happens offline, you might email the itinerary to them. And so we can put a tracking pixel in the email, so when the email opens up, we can track it that way. So there's lots of different ways.
And we take a similar approach with our retail and financial service customers where in a lot of those instances they have to log in or they have rewards accounts. So when they engage with those in the digital space, we can track that against their cookie. And then with their purchase, they typically either swipe the rewards or they use their account in financial services instance. And we can stitch that back together in post-process and bring it in and have it available for the attribution models.
And obviously, the Google Analytics moved on to Universal Analytics, which supports measurement protocol, which also supports to send offline hits to the GA backend. So you can start tracking your offline engagements through Google Analytics.
We have a team of people in every city who visit every person's house to see what they purchased.
So the hard part is getting people to authenticate, I think was the point.
It's our new product. Yeah.
All right. Any more questions? And then I have one last question for the panel. And yeah.
In general, who's more bought in across the categories? So maybe through CCG, through high-end financial clients, and which ones are more bought in, or which ones need it more?
Attribution in general?
Yes.
Yeah.
I bet you that's different for all four of you. So why don't you all answer it? Start with Jeremy and just go along.
Well, I've seen actually all of them. I guess the biggest difference I'd have is what I've seen in the attribution world is with regards to their needs, their attribution window, how large of a time span prior to their conversion events they want to expand them. So B2B, they want it to be much larger. Their cycles can be 6 to 9 months. Where you're talking consumer, it could be 30 days, 14 days. That has been the biggest difference versus need it or not. I've seen them all need it with regards to the discussions around attribution.
So no particular vertical?
No.
Stefan?
So I'd actually like to rephrase that question, and that is, who only knows last click, and for who does that lack of knowledge not matter, right? That's essentially what you ask. And one of the things that I when we looked at when I started at Google, I used to run attribution modeling in Excel sheets. That was amazing. That was a great experience for me, 100 megabyte Excel sheets. But what you could really see is that when you'd actually break it down to a level where clients would see the impact of their campaigns when comparing different models to each other, they would see whether they would actually fall into a bucket where there was large changes in that landscape of funnel analyses. And for the ones that did not have long click paths, for the ones that did not have, a lot of activity in their marketing engagement of their clients, the matrix was very flat. So that additional knowledge that was generated by the attribution model was very small, right? Those usually clients that have short click paths, really. So the correlation that I saw there was short click paths usually translate into something that means that the additional information provided by attribution, the rules-based part is not as big. Whereas if you have long click paths, like travel providers is a very good example in digital, right? there's a large volume, there's a large value in the conversion. There's a long decision cycle before the conversion. Those obviously have a large part that is hidden when they only look at last click. So I would say long conversion paths and high conversion volume is correlated with importance of attribution.
So I'll break it down very easily for you. Agencies are like, they treat their clients like a boat, you know. A boat, there's 2 great days when you buy a boat, the day you buy it and the day you sell it. So I'm sorry, agencies, but you guys work your asses off to gain a client. And so when you're going out to pitch a client, you want attribution, you want viewability, you want all the tools you have. And when the client's about to walk, you want it there too. But when you have a client that's been with you for a long time, you don't want to rock the boat. You don't want to add anything new. And the big clients, the big, huge clients, we've gone to some of them that we've worked with and we said, hey, look at this over here. We're going to save you $10 million a year. And they're like, huh, we don't care. But the little guy who sells mattresses online, when I show him that this one ad network is wasting $5,000 a month, this guy jumps like there's no tomorrow because he knows he can get a 10-to-1 return on another network and take that $5,000 and turn it into $50,000 additional revenue a month, which is $600,000 additional revenue a year. And at his margins of 50%, that's $300,000 a year in his pocket, and that pays for his new vacation home. So for the little guys, these guys are moving really fast. The big guys, they don't care as much.
We actually have a different experience, a little bit more like Stefan's.
Thank God.
Yeah, well, so maybe coming at it from different angles. So
again, the question was really which category?
Right, what categories? So the bigger the media spend in digital and the harder the conversion, those are the early adopters. So that's financial services, it's travel, it's telecom, it's automotive actually, although the purchase cycles are really long, they're pretty slow moving. They're spending an immense amount online. It's a little bit what Stefan said, which is, Stefan said that if it's a considered purchase where people are doing a lot of research on the web, that lends itself. So automotive, we're starting to see pharma actually, even though it's not a hard conversion event, that's starting to crop up. Those are the early adopters. Multi-channel retail to a certain extent, EDU, another one spending a lot of money. So it's just go to the biggest advertisers that spend more, the biggest share of their budget in digital. Those are the early adopters that we're seeing right now.
All right, so I've got one last question and then we're done. We can have some more drinks on the 27th floor. It's my favorite question. You've all heard it before, except Jeremy, you haven't, so you can go last. So you're ready. We'll start with you. When you run attribution, what's the biggest loser? So, you know, you run it, you see it over lots of categories, you see it in lots of places. Which media type, which media placement, which types of vendors, which ones most often do you find out are not creating value?
Yeah,
and
so,
don't say Magnetic.
Yeah, Magnetic does great. They're
go.
awesome. So yeah, I usually go last. I get to be like the curveball at the end. So I'll do the more traditional things. So search does tend to obviously get less credit. But what I'll say is that a lot of times what we find is search might get less credit, but when you do a better job with attribution, you actually increase your search spend, which is always good for Google. And the reason for that is when you do a more effective, yeah, right. Everything comes back to Google. When you do a more effective job at building top of the funnel awareness, you build more interest, and that drives more search queries, and you got to be there to pay for that to harvest that demand. So even though search gets less credit, when you use attribution, you might end up actually spending more money on search because you do a better job.
Imagine you get some insights into different kinds of search doing better as well.
Yeah, right. You know, we talked about branded versus non-branded. You know, that definitely comes into play as well.
I think the biggest losers are the folks that are out there that are cheating. I mean, one of the advantages of attribution is that all of a sudden you've got this kind of person. It's like Superman's cape. All of a sudden I'm overlooking your entire ad spend, and the folks that you've been running with for a couple of years now all of a sudden realize that someone is watching them. They've never been watched before. Like many of you will buy your display impressions and you'll look at the delivery every day if you're doing a great, phenomenal job, but more than likely at the end of every week to see if you're fitting the plan. But once you start looking at it on an hourly basis and you realize that 90% of your impressions are being blown out between midnight and 1, you realize this is probably not that effective. And then when you add in viewability and you realize that maybe less than 10% of your ads are actually being seen, you realize it's nice to have attribution there. So the losers in this game are the folks that are taking advantage of the fact that you have nobody watching things. and it's usually the middlemen that are kind of playing around.
So I think we all agree that last click in its name has a position information. So the losers that we see are usually the ones that appear on that position that you try to move away from. And some examples I could bring up would basically bring things like affiliate channel, which is more likely to appear in the last position of the conversion funnel, and that is usually where I see you move credit off from that position and show performance on a different position of the funnel. So obviously that means that something that appears in that last click position more likely will lose out.
Jeremy?
So I guess I'd want to define winner versus loser here. The idea is that every day you have a job to execute and get customers to your site and have them convert, whatever that means for your business. And you're stuck with the challenge of you have a budget to work with and a target to reach. And then next quarter, same budget to work with, bigger target to reach. Next quarter, same budget again, even larger target. Well, I don't know what Google has, but most companies work that way. Get more with less, right? So the idea here isn't winners or losers, but it's what's working best for you. So what we've seen with customers in the areas where they've been able to reallocate budget to put it more on the winner side, they pull back from branded search because they realize that organic's working well for them. They even pull back from display in the presence that they're seeing a lot of recycling. They're seeing a lot of the same impressions hit the same people over and over again without higher lift on positive outcome. So those are the two main areas that we've seen that people shifted from the loser bucket to the winner bucket, the one that drives more at the end of the day for their business.
All right. Can I have a round of applause for the panel? Thank you very much.